Two more questions before we finish here. Do you have any idea how monastic bias against marriage originated? Well, that's a rather strange thing. The monastic bias against marriage is sheer Gnosticism, and it almost certainly came directly from Manichaeism into Christianity. Manichaean monks in the Egyptian desert had a huge influence on Orthodox Christian ascetic literature and ascetic ideas. So we find some of these ideas that drifted in from this Gnostic presence, even in some of the writings of Macarius the Great and others. But the prejudice against marriage is clear, pure and simple, Gnosticism. And it did come from the Manichaeans. The Essenes had a low view of marriage, but not quite such a horrible view of women. But for Manichaeans, marriage was a form of sin, and Augustine of Hippo, who had Manichaean roots and never got rid of his Manichaeism completely, thought that marriage was a venial sin. So marriage is a sin, according to Augustine, cloaked in the guise of respectability for the sake of procreation. So we'll find that those monks who are attached to the heresies of Augustine of Hippo will also generally have a very low regard for marriage and very often an almost misogynistic view of women. That's really where it originates. It's a Gnostic idea that crept into monasticism from sheer Gnosticism. I'm attracted to existential philosophy. I've been told that existentialism is atheistic. Is that true? Of course it's not true. Modern existentialism was exposed by one of the very deep Christian thinkers of Western Europe, Soren Kierkegaard. And his main issue in resuscitating existentialism was the idea that in state churches, people were Christians because it was kind of a patriotic duty to be Christians, much like in North America today. Patriotic duty to be Christians even if you're not really a believer. But Soren Kierkegaard turned to existentialism because existentialism requires that you practice what you believe, that you take responsibility for what you believe and for the course and quality of your life, and not simply show up in church and just be there because you're supposed to do it or because you're required to do it. That's the real root of existentialism in modern times. Now there were some atheistic existentialist philosophers, of course. But however, we had in Europe also Marcel, who was a great Roman Catholic existentialist, Martin Buber, who was a deeply believing Jewish existentialist and made some marvelous commentaries on the scripture. But among Orthodox Christians, the most famous and well-known of the existentialist teachers was St. Gregory Palamas. St. Gregory Palamas and also St. Simeon the New Theologian. These were both existentialist teachers, philosophers, and really reminded us that Orthodox Christian theology is completely existential. Orthodox Christians who really follow the methods and practice of the faith are all existentialists. So we can't look at just the few like Jean-Paul Sartre or a few other atheist existentialists, perhaps Nietzsche, and suggest that existentialism is an atheist movement, because actually it's primarily a Christian movement. And for Orthodox Christians in particular, Fyodor Dostoevsky gave us a world of existentialism. All of his writings are deeply existential and deeply concerned with the practice of the Orthodox faith.